good afternoon, and welcome to the Boise Metro Chamber's Legislative Update Series. My name is Tori Thomas. I am the Community and Government Affairs Manager here at the Chamber and your host for today's event. The Boise Metro Chamber is Idaho's only 5-star accredited chamber and represents nearly 2,000 members. We are only able to provide current events and educational content because of our members and the investment in our community. Before I introduce our panelists today, I want to thank Optum Idaho for their generous support. Please enjoy this quick video from our sponsor.
The role of the caregiver is invaluable, but it can be exhausting mentally, emotionally, and physically. Optum and Hello Idaho helps by providing resources to support caregivers. Learn more at optumidaho.com.
For today's legislative update, we are joined by Senator Lori Den Hartog and Representative Brooke Green. Hi guys, thanks so much for being here.
Hello, we're excited to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Well, Senator Lori Den Hartog is a graduate of Nampa Christian High School. She received her BA in Business Administration and Public Administration from Dordt University. Her professional background includes land use and transportation planning and grant administration. She was also recently called the Taylor Swift of Transportation in our Transportation Committee, so thought I'd add that in there.
Thank you, Tori. I haven't added that to my name tag yet.
Needs to be added to the bio. All right, and then raised in Los Alamos, New Mexico, Representative Brooke Green received her master's degree in business administration and degrees in both communication and marketing technology. Representative Green is a 2011 graduate of Leadership Boise and has been recognized with many accomplishments, one being Idaho Business Review's 2010's 40 Under 40. So thanks again for being here. We appreciate you guys so much and all the work that you're doing. Well,
we're excited.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Before we start our conversation, I want to just ask how you're both doing. We're week 6 in the legislature, so how's it going so far?
Is it April yet? I don't know. It's been a really interesting session, to say the least. Obviously, a lot of activity on the House side, but there's been a lot of behind the scenes things going on the Senate side too. Obviously, the changes to the budget have really dominated almost all the conversations in the Capitol. And I've told people it feels like that conversation, and Representative Green is more in that because she's on the Joint Committee. But it feels like that sucked the oxygen out of the building for all other topics. So hopefully we'll be able to move forward with all of the wild things that happened last week.
Yeah, and I suppose I can kind of briefly speak to all those wild things that did happen. We had several firsts in the House, and in my opinion, incredibly unfortunate because it's taking away from what we should be doing, which is actually focusing on the business of Idahoans. Instead, we've spent a lot of time with this division among the majority party. And if you're not up to speed, just to briefly speak to that, we saw the first time a majority leader was removed from her seat. She happened to be the first female majority leader we've seen. And we wanted to go back and take a peek and how long that has happened. And it, from what we understand, has not happened. In addition to that, it was the first time that we were asked to provide a vote of confidence of the speaker. And of course, unanimously, the chamber agreed to that. 2 issues that I don't think were anywhere in sight when we began the session, and 2 issues that I really wish that had never come. We do work very well with our colleagues across the aisle. We don't want to see that type of dysfunctioning happen here in this building. We should be focusing on the business of Idahoans. And so I'm glad it's over. We can move forward. We'll continue to work, across those aisles to work on good legislations and legislations that we may have a different opinion on, but that's perfectly okay. Having good civil discourse is incredibly important in this building, and I hope that continues as we get past what happened last week.
And luckily for today, transportation is one of those where it is pretty easy for us to work.
We can usually agree on a lot of things when it comes to transportation. So it's a lot of fun to be here with the senator and speak about these topics before us.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that little bit of an update because I think, some folks are really focused on what's going on and keeping up to date, but I think there probably are a few viewers that don't exactly know what's going on. So there's a lot of great articles out there for folks that want to dive into this conversation. And I think, as the chamber, the Boise chamber, when that came out, I was just thinking, it might kind of streamline the budget process. We might get out early. This is going to go fast. This is great. And then you're right. We haven't really been able to focus on a bunch of business, been more focused on that. So it'll be really interesting to see it all play out and, into March. And so we appreciate the work that you are doing, especially being on JFAC. I'm sure that's, if anything, it makes for, a good chapter in your book someday.
Like a chapter, I will say.
Yeah. Well,
to speak a little bit to the new budget process, and I'll speak from a member who's not on the joint committee. Obviously, this big of a change is going to have some bumps along the way. And I think that's been part of the struggles that we've had, is there's a little bit of fear and anxiety with that change, not understanding fully how the new process is going to work. And a lot of that involves trust, and trust is in a little bit of short supply around here. And so hopefully we can rebuild that. And as we move forward now, my hope is for the floor, for those of us who haven't been as involved in the new process, is, now with those first budgets starting to make their way through, that those on the joint committee are obviously working on, those new requests, replacement items, all those things that we expect to be able to see on the floor at a future date. So hopefully it doesn't delay us too much for the session. I hope we're not here in April.
Yes, please. If we go past my birthday, we know we've been here too long. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, my birthday is April 30th. So that's when you really went too far.
Absolutely not. I like to get back to my day job. So.
Well, yeah, we appreciate that update. Thank you. I almost should do a legislative update that's just JFAC, because
you probably could.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting conversation, even without this new stuff. I think just the process of the budget and the, everything that's involved with it is, it's really complex. So, well, let's jump into some transportation conversations. We'll start with you, Representative Green. In the governor's recent State of the State budget proposal, he mentioned the $300 million going to bridges, and then $50 million going towards TECM to expand projects. Can you provide a little bit of an update on those efforts?
Yeah, and I think this is a really good opportunity. I'll give you, through my lens, the budget process itself and what that looks like actually for transportation budget. So I do sit on JFAC, have for several years now, and I do actually work on the transportation budget. So I'm very familiar with what that looks like. The new budget process, while there is some hesitation, I'm still out on whether or not what this is going to look like, if it was good change or bad change. And change is just uncomfortable in general. And so what you're seeing with the budgets is the first budgets that you're seeing hit the floor now in these ominous budgets. These are maintenance budgets. These are apparently the budgets that are supposed to just keep the lights on. What you're going to see next is the second half of those budgets. And our working groups, and I will say one of the most positive changes that have come out of the new approach for JFAC are our working groups. We meet in our groups, somewhere, I want to say 4, 5, 6 folks. Certainly we don't get to a quorum, but we meet and we actually discuss each line item that is left on that budget. And we go from one line item to the next. And so rest assured, when it comes to the transportation budget, that conversation is actually happening right now, where we're going line item by line item as a team. And we're looking through and saying, well, what are their needs? What is it that they need to attain? What is, like you mentioned, the $300 million for bridges? What does that look like? Are we spending the dollars we've already allocated? So all of that is happening. And so to the team's approach, we're actually meeting this afternoon to go back over that transportation budget. The team will make a decision, a motion as a team, and that's what we hope will go to the actual full body for a vote. That's a little bit different in the past. We used to have to chase each other around trying to figure out who's working on what motion sheet. For bridges, as well as for the additional maintenance upgrades that we're asking for, this is just in alignment with what the governor has been pushing for some time. We recognize as a state our deferred maintenance pertaining to transportation infrastructure. We're really behind. The further we push this down the road, the more expensive it's going to be. However, I caution you, my dear friends over here, the transportation budget has the largest dollars coming out of the general funds. As a result, it's got the largest target. And I say target is oftentimes our policies that are passed in this body have a fiscal note attached to them. That fiscal note, those dollars have to come from somewhere. And we have really 2 big asks that are out there right now. It's the school facilities program. That's a very large $200 million request. In addition to that, what are you calling it?
Yeah.
The voucher pro.
No,
What are we calling
use
it?
the right words. It's the
I'm going to let her use her words.
It's the parental education tax credit legislation, and that has a $50 million fiscal note. So yes, we were talking beforehand. So we both care about education.
Absolutely.
We both care about transportation. So we have to figure out how to weigh those things in the balance and make sure that at the end of the day we have a balanced budget for the state.
And what priorities pretty much draw down from those dollars. Transportation is the biggest chunk of money besides just education. And so I guarantee you it's got a target on its back. The working group is working really hard to keep the budget together, recognizing the deferred maintenance and the need for improved bridges and such. So while I can't tell you where we're at now, I can tell you at 2:00 this afternoon when we meet again, we will have further discussion about the transportation budget. But I can also tell you the folks over here have some eyes set on some of those dollars, and we're going to do what we can to ensure that we, keep the governor's promise pertaining to infrastructure enhancement for our roads, while also recognizing there are some policies that are coming through, and those are going to need some dollars as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's two different components to this. So for those listening, you may know that under Governor Little, we've done some extraordinary things through using general fund dollars on roads and bridges. And that has been a huge change. There were years and years, none of that. We are not statutorily obligated to spend the general fund dollars that way, but we've been able, when we've used the surplus dollars and the amount in our budget, we've been able to make those investments without raising taxes, whether it's gas tax or registration fees, to fund needed transportation infrastructure. The second component of the governor's proposal, I believe, needs a policy bill. So the $50 million additional for the TECM, the Transportation Expansion Congestion Mitigation Fund, that would require a policy change that would have to come through either the tax or the transportation committees. And so far, we haven't seen that piece of legislation surface yet.
So there's a lot of competing interests coming forward with these general dollars that are coming down the pipeline. And to your point, we haven't in the past had such an influx of dollars from our general funds for transportation. But now that we've done it, are we going to keep that momentum, or are we going to pull back and fund some of these other policy pieces that are coming through?
Interesting. I think, obviously you guys both talked about transportation and education. Those are two huge priorities for the chamber. We just had Representative Yamamoto on talking about all the stuff going on with education. So it's a big conversation, I'm sure, with deciding where that money goes. And those are two big priorities. Like, our state needs both of those things. So it's great to hear you all are trying to work together on that. And it'll be interesting to hear at 2 p.m. or, afterwards, what's going on with all of that. So, well, this next question will be for both of you. So we'll start with you, Senator Den Hartog. There's obviously a lot of local transportation projects going on. Can you provide an update on those, including Highway 16, and if there's any sidewalk pedestrian projects?
Yeah, thank you. I'll take the State Highway 16 question. I think I'm going to turn it to Representative Green for the sidewalk projects. So if you've driven out between Meridian and Nampa, hopefully you have seen some of that, and between Eagle and Nampa, hopefully you've seen construction at both ends. So the mainline construction of State Highway 16 is underway. A couple of updates from the department. The interchanges for State Highway 16 are getting close to being ready to be advertised. So the folks may know and understand that that's going to be more of a freeway interstate type design that's going to have interchanges, I think, at 2-mile intervals. So those are going to be ready to be advertised. So for the folks at the chamber, when you wonder, okay, what's happening with the TECM dollars, State Highway 16 is funded with TECM dollars. That bonding program has really allowed us to do a lot of things much more quickly and with state dollars, and we really have seen the benefits of that. A couple of other statewide projects that are underway, both Eagle Road and Broadway have been repaved. If you've driven those, you know what a benefit that is. I drive Eagle Road fairly frequently. I haven't been on Broadway, so hopefully the paving is good. Let us know if it's not. And then we continue to do improvements on the interstate out in Caldwell. There's been a lot of effort to improve that corridor. There's been work out there. And then this one, I was excited to see, it says ITD is planning a study to look at some auxiliary lanes between the interchanges on 84 between the Y and Garrity. So I think we know we have some bottlenecks there. So just looking at hopefully some creative solutions. Obviously, we're constrained in that corridor. We can't do a lot. But hopefully we can do something that will help folks out. And then the other thing that happened last year, the year before, it was just last year, the local strategic initiatives grant program. Yes. That program was divided up between urban and rural. Those projects have been awarded. So 48 of those projects have been awarded. There's 11 large urban projects and 37 of the small rural projects have been awarded. So I think we'll see those hopefully in and around our area and around the state.
Well, I think it emphasizes the commitment, being able to take some one-time dollars that we had from our ARPA dollars, in addition to that commitment from the governor pertaining to infrastructure enhancement. We're starting to see it actually play out. Yeah. Highway 16 is going to be a critical relief valve for our valley. And so really eager to see what that looks like, because it's certainly going to provide another connection piece. To your point, you were asking about bike and ped. And so full disclosure, outside of the legislature as a state representative, I'm also a transportation planner with Ada County Highway District. And I'm really thrilled to have the privilege to work in both of those fields. And I will say I'm given my leave without pay to come and do the work here. But I rest assured, it's always in the back of my mind. We're a citizen legislature, and that enables us to take our experiences in our day jobs and apply them here at the state. And so it's really exciting to be able to speak about transportation when it's both my hats. So as it pertains to bike and pedestrians, there's no question that in the last year we have seen an unfortunate increase of pedestrian and vehicle collisions. And so, it is something that we have our eye on, something that a couple of years ago we started to pass at the governor's recommendation, $10 million investment into child safety enhancement projects throughout Idaho. And that $10 million did funnel some money to our local levels, more of our rural communities who don't even have a sidewalk. I think it was Apple, Idaho last year got their first sidewalk because of these dollars. And while that seems here in the valley, like what? But the reality is in these rural communities, they just don't have that local revenue to be able to generate funding for those projects. So it's really exciting to see our commitment to child and safety enhancement. I will tell you, however, we didn't see that $10 million recommendation come in from the governor this year. And of course, that hurts deep down. From a child who was literally hit by a car on my way to schools, I recognize the value of, I recognize the value of being able to provide a safe sidewalk for kids to walk on. And so we don't see that in his recommendations, but rest assured, I'm certainly working hard to find some dollars to help more of our rural communities be able to attain that first sidewalk or that safe sidewalk for kids. For the valley, to that point, I want to just really highlight, because Ada County Highway District has done a concerted effort to really enhance and to prioritize child safety projects, especially for cyclists as well as pedestrians, because we know that the kids have got to walk somewhere, whether to school or to a local attractor. And so I do want to highlight a really great tool that you may not be aware of. ACHD produces what's its integrated 5-year work plan. It's an interactive map that you can log on to our website, and I'll provide you a link later you can send out, and take a look and in your neighborhood what's coming down the pipeline, right? That is going to enable your kids to get to school or to the park. We have several projects on, in the queue. Many of them are just sidewalk gap enhancements and large scale sidewalk projects. And so look to that map. I'd hate to go through all of them, but I did do a quick look, and we have over 50 projects that are pedestrian cyclist enhancements, and incredibly critical to our community. We know our kids need a safe place to walk. Those who have to utilize, who do utilize our sidewalks to get to work, it's incredible that our infrastructure is both bike, ped, and vehicles, and we need to figure out what that balance is. I think we've done a phenomenal job at Ada County Highway District in which doing that.
And Tori, to Representative Green's point about something not being in the governor's rec, this is one of the things that, at least for someone who's outside of the joint committee, that I'm excited about for the new budget process, is it feels like we have legislative priorities or things that we know are important. Some of them require policy pieces, others don't. This pedestrian one would not require a new policy piece. If Representative Green and the work group can find a way and find the funds to be able to put into this existing program, that would be fabulous. And so the way this budget process, as you kind of peel back the layers and start to understand, sometimes we as legislators feel like, we're either running uphill or running with the governor on his recommendations. And we can be like, hey, oh yes, we're all on board, or wait a minute, we have some other priorities that haven't been completed yet. So I think that example is a prime example of, legislators saying, okay, we still think this is a priority and we haven't quite finished our commitment in that area yet.
And we're doing that as a work group where we're really having this conversation really about what is important in our local communities, whether it be rural or urban. And this was important. And so it was really sad to see it removed, but I understand priorities are what they are. The governor listed them out. As a legislative body, we're also recognizing, what, this is a really great tool our rural communities use. And let's see if we can find means to continue that effort.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think you're probably always going to see that, even if you agreed full-heartedly with his priorities or with someone else's priorities, there's always going to be something else to be focused on. I saw a meme the other day. It was like, be like Idaho roads and never stop growing, never stop or never stop working on yourself. Like, so it's just like, that's obviously something that can always be, a priority. And it's cool to hear that you guys are so focused on that and adding to it, not just looking at his budget and his proposals, but adding to what we need. I think also locally, you see it a little differently. If you're in Ada County or you're in Canyon County, you see things that, not the whole state doesn't notice. So it's really good to get those local perspectives. So, well, we'll jump back to you, Senator. You mentioned the Strategic Initiatives Grant Program. So I wanted you to maybe elaborate a little bit. You were a huge part in making that possible. Can you kind of break that down for the viewers just to give them a little bit more of an understanding of what that does? And then you mentioned the projects that it covers. Do you think that'll continue on and we'll see more money going towards it?
Yeah, so the local strategic initiatives grant program it really is a recognition that when the state comes in with a big project, and State Highway 16 is a great example, is that when the state comes in with a big project like that, we have an impact to the local system that connects to it or needs to connect to it. So, that was really the impetus for that program, was saying, okay, if the state's going to come in and widen, and then we know we're going to create this opportunity for more economic development. We're going to have more people that say, oh, there's more traffic. We want to locate our business here. And then the locals are saying, we just have a little 2-lane, country road out here. We need some help. So that was really the foundation for that program. And I think the heart of it is really important, because I think when we act as the state to make transportation investments, we have to realize that it's all connected, that we have to connect with our local partners. And I think twofold is when we do that, and we've seen that both in the pedestrian projects and in something like the local strategic initiatives, is that when the state is able to come in with some funding for support, it certainly doesn't cover everything or pay for everything. Nothing ever does, but it helps to alleviate some of the potential burden on the property taxpayers in those communities. And that's why you'll hear some of these programs sold as either property tax relief or trying to keep property taxes low. Again, here in Ada County, it's a little bit different than some of the other counties and small rural communities with what they're able to do or not do with their local property taxes. So we had the strategic initiatives was $100 million. That division between $50 million to urban, $50 million to rural. There were 127 applications with a total of $290 million in various projects. So you can see the $100 million certainly didn't take care of everything or go far enough. And that's actually one of the things we have to balance here at the legislature, is sometimes our colleagues who are not, and this is true of a lot of issues, if they're not like in depth in the weeds on it, they'll be like, well, didn't we just give a whole bunch of money to transportation the last few years? What more could they need? So that's one of the things actually we try to balance as legislators, in really making sure people still understand the needs. And some of these programs, because then communities have submitted applications, and like the bridge program is another one where it's easy to point to and say, we had all these unmet needs, we still need more funding to address that. But that dynamic, certainly, I think it was in and around the building last year, and I think it's in and around the building this year, this idea that there's been enough money, quote unquote, to transportation. I would assume you're hearing some of that.
I'm hearing it too. And we have to oftentimes remind them that, the first funding that came through was just really setting the foundation. This is for several years an expectation that we need to be enhancing and spending dollars on our infrastructure, to the initiative effort that you guys took care of last year. Locally, just right there at Highway 16, we have 7 projects that we're able to leverage potentially some of those dollars to be able to address the bottleneck. These big projects come in and oftentimes are a little on a faster track than the locals can actually keep up with. And so by providing another additional funding mechanism for them to draw down on, so that while we get these bigger, large state projects, the local roads aren't having to, that volume capacity, they're able to address it, or that access, they're able to address it without raising their property taxes, because many of our local communities have nowhere near the ability to generate dollars and revenue like we do here in Ada County. They don't, and we need to ensure that they can continue to provide for their communities as well.
Yeah, and it comes down to the population growth too. It's not slowing down, so you have to pay attention to that. And yeah, you're right. The local needs sometimes are able to be met right away or in a timely manner. So it's good to know that we have the state behind us, and it's exciting as an Idaho native. It's exciting to see it all just blow up. Sometimes I get annoyed with the traffic, but I do appreciate it growing a lot and seeing new things. And I'm also terrified to ride my bike in town. I really appreciate, you say kid friendly, which I love, but I'm also going to take a peek for myself and make sure I can have some safe sidewalks and roads and bike lanes to be in.
Absolutely. As a lot of my work in my day job is to address that very thing. So how do we find a level of comfort for bikes and pedestrians, cyclists and pedestrians to get through, while at the same time meeting the needs for volume capacity and that that growth, right? People sit in their cars and it's like, I shouldn't be here. But they're part of the problem. They're the growth that we're trying to accommodate. And so what's that balance look like, and can we attain that? And where does the legislature play a role in helping our communities address some of that and that balancing, and where should we be and where should we not be? That is a big one that we grapple with down here.
I like that. I'm gonna do that for my motto in life. Where should I be and where should I not be? Anything. Well, segueing a little bit through growth and all that's going on within Ada County, but also the whole state in general, chatting a little bit about public transportation. This has obviously been a big conversation with the city and with VRT and with so many other partners. And it helps spread people. It helps people get where they need to go. And you could, use that as the micro mobility buses, but also Amtrak and trying to get rails in here. What's your guys' perspective on that? Are there conversations happening with all of that? And yeah, either one.
I'll look to my dear friend first.
Who wants to take this first? Well, this may not be the answer you want to hear, but I think we would both give the same answer. There isn't much conversation at the legislature, honestly, about public transportation. I mean, over the years, it has ebbed and flowed, where you have folks coming in talking about, things like local option sales tax to fund public transportation. I think had the grant application not been submitted incorrectly, that might have been more of a topic of conversation this session. I haven't heard much on the Senate side, frankly, about that, but I know there are folks interested in that, and I still think it's worth exploring. For me personally, I think as we see continued innovation in the transportation space, I think it would benefit all of us if we make sure that when we say things like public transportation, people have like this image in their mind of what it is. If they're thinking, fixed rail, just it has to be very rigid this certain way, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be. And we're seeing some really exciting, innovative things. And I, for one, would like to see the conversation pivot to that, and how can we support those innovations in public transportation. I'll probably leave it at that. I'll let you. I'll let you.
Well, and to the good senator's point, yeah, right. The conversation, is that happening? It's really isn't, and partly I think it's because this body still has to warm up to the idea of public transportation. Oftentimes, when you talk about public transportation, it's through the lens of what's happening in other larger cities, and we don't want to be like any larger city. But the reality is we have this growth, and we have to figure out a mechanism and how do we accommodate the growth, because we cannot build ourselves out of this. We just can't keep getting, our roads larger and larger. So with that being said, I think the first and unfortunate thing that occurred was we really did see this effort that grew all along the Amtrak corridor of mayors and unfortunately neighboring states kind of buy into this idea of, can we apply for these dollars to conduct a study to look at Amtrak, right? Another piece of public transit that we can bring back. And as a staff member at a public entity, my worst fear would be exactly what happened, right? This unfortunate putting the grant into the wrong place. And that just terrifies me. I certainly understand and I feel for whomever that happened to. However, we do, and I believe should continue to have the conversation, is what can we do to position ourselves for the next time? Can we accomplish some of the study now with the dollars that we have available at ITD? While we may not be able to do the full study, but is there a portion of it we can? Because we need to keep that conversation continuing. As it pertains for here and that innovative approach, I think that's what we need to do as a full, and Valley Regional Transit's there, right? How innovative can we be to provide? And we also need to talk about public transit outside of just getting to and from one place, but it's also a housing thing. If we could talk about, if we can enhance public transportation, we're opening an avenue for people to afford homes in other neighboring communities, because as further we get out from the downtown core, the more affordable homes become. Well, then they have to sit in traffic for an hour. But can we come up with another tool in which to get them here? I know that there was discussion about a bus rapid transit along the existing rail. That's a cheaper approach. We could utilize it with some asphalt. It doesn't have to be fixed rail. Those are the conversations we need to be having. And I think they already are having. I'm pretty confident they are. Now, as it pertains to this body, we need to warm up to it. I think speaking to us, we're both transportation planner, previous transportation planner. We know that conversation's happening. We just need to encourage our colleagues who all come from rural communities who do not see public transportation through the same lens in which we do. They oftentimes look at it as it's not necessary. Why are we funding for it? Although I think a local option with a sunset could potentially come forward, and I would love to see that.
Well, that might be a little bonus question. I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on local option. That's obviously been a conversation that's been had, especially this year, but it's not a new conversation. How would that, continuously help transportation, and what is the temperature on that?
Senator?
Well, for me personally, the temperature is still very cold on local option sales tax. And I say that a little bit in jest, but that's where I've been. That's where the conversation has been. I don't think the Senate has changed as a whole on that, even though the body has changed. It definitely pops up from time to time. And I think part of the reason we're sensitive, at least, maybe not, I won't say we. Part of the reason I'm sensitive to it, and for me, I equate it some to what we do with school bonds and levies on our property tax rolls. Is that something that people vote on locally? And obviously, for some, there's the argument that, well, maybe the state should be picking up more of the tabs, so locals aren't doing that. But what happens is locals vote for it, and then they get mad that their property taxes have increased, and then they come to the state and ask us to solve their property tax problem. Like, we don't collect any property taxes. Now, sales tax is a little bit different. Obviously, it's a consumption tax, and so, but the same type of thing might happen. I think if there were ever to be something that would be successful coming through the whole legislature, it would have to be very narrow, very specific to a certain project, a defined period of time. I think that would be, at least in my estimation, the only way we would ever see something, even to start to get momentum.
Well, and I think we are hearing that. We're hearing it from some of our rural communities who are struggling to get bonds passages, or just a vote for whether it be wastewater treatment plants or jails, because, those are not the hot topics, right? When you're thinking of providing for your communities, the last thing you're thinking of is a jail. However, there is a need. With the temperature on the house side, it's very cold as well. And to the point about being able to pursue a local option, it is going to have to be very narrowly defined. It's going to have a sunset. It's going to have to, and I suspect, it's going to have a high threshold for passage. These are the things that are going to be the check marks if we're ever going to have that conversation. In addition, the body would have to change too. We look to both of our legislative bodies, and the temperature is, there's just no stomach for it. Although it's increasing as some of these more smaller communities start to struggle with being able to take care of some critical infrastructure. That's when the conversation starts to reappear. Does it reappear for public transit? No, it does. That discussion's not happening. But does it appear for such things as wastewater treatment plants or jails? Yes, the conversation is occurring, and seems to be the place where people are interested. But to that point, narrowly defined, a sunset clause, I suspect a high threshold, then we can pursue a local option. Is this something I'd like to see? Absolutely. Is this something that's going to take some time? Well, we're still here, and we've been talking about local option for how many years now?
Long time.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've definitely been, part of those conversations more, and I've only been in this position for a few years. And so I never thought I'd be in politics. I will say that. So learning all of this stuff is really interesting. And I think the local tax option is, it's obviously proven to be successful certain places, but I think, to your point, obviously a lot of people have to be on board, and it has to be the right project for it. So, but I appreciate your perspective on that as well. So, well, with that, we really appreciate your time today and all the work that you guys do for transportation. It's so interesting hearing from both of you, and we're really grateful for you and the rest of the legislature. And we hope that we'll get out on time or around that, and hopefully.
I'd like to get back to my other job. Well, I love this job. I love that one just as much. So.
Yes.
The other one probably doesn't create as much gray hair.
Yeah, no. Here's a whole different level of intensity. However, I'm lucky for the friendship that I have with the senator. It's been a lot of fun that's the one thing, if anything comes out of this, is that the people you get to meet, and there is conversations that occur, and there's a lot of bipartisanship that occurs. So while you may see something different in the headlines, rest assured there's a lot of conversations that are happening here, and a lot of people who do work really hard for Idahoans.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think there's a lot. I think the bad gets highlighted so much. And I'm sure you feel it when you hear from people. I'm sure it's a lot focused on the bad part rather than the good parts or the thank yous that you're doing something. So it's definitely something that we try to encourage folks to reach out and not just share their concerns, but also share some of their gratitudes, and just if they have a thank you or even just a hello, like humanizing all of you to know that you want to make Idaho great, and that's what everyone else wants too.
We're in good company over here.
We are. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, of course. Well, with that, thanks to everyone that tuned in. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Optum Idaho, and our media partners, Idaho Ed News, Idaho Capital Sun, Idaho Press, and Idaho Statesman. And with that, stay tuned for the next episode, and thanks so much for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you.